All right, just me singing by myself. How we like to roll.
I have pushed smelting up by like 30 or 40 levels.
Oh wow, that's incredible. Oh, I saw you got mining to over 100. So I think that'll probably helps that you're getting that higher level materials for smelting, right?
Yes, now I can make star metal ingots.
Nice.
Which I just ran out of obsidian flux.
Aha, yep.
And
that's how they get you.
That's going to be my bottleneck. Which I think that was coming from all the questing I was doing. So I had like 300 of it built up. So there was good money to be made there.
Yeah, I always like how all my assets they built up, and then I go and like, oh, I need to grind out a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I'm out of stuff.
344 star metal ingots. I don't even know if that's a lot. It's how many I have though.
Yeah.
I don't know how many is used for things. So if I go to star metal ingot, how much is it worth?
A lot.
Is it?
Yeah, unless like for some reason we've seen a crash in the market or something like that. Like pull it up, see what is it? What's the running right now for you?
5 or 6 a piece.
Yeah, is that a buy order? 5 or 6?
No, that's somebody that's
listing it for sale. What are people willing to buy it from you instantly?
Oh,
if you go to like the little
4.
Oh, 4. Yes, that's good. So it's like you're basically asking the question is like, are you willing to? Do you want 4 now or do you want 6 later? And it's like, okay, like, and that kind of like fluctuates, man. And like
it's always nice. 1,200 gold.
It's still a lot. That's a lot of gold.
My crafting tools have been like 2,000, or my gathering tools have been like 2,000, 3,000 a piece.
You should shop around. Like use the extra filters and kind of find different perks because different things get weighted differently.
No, I wanted really specific things. I wanted to be up at $5.99 and I wanted really specific perks on it.
Okay, yeah. If you're perk hunting, that's where the pricing is variable. Because like I was like, if you're just gear score hunting, somebody could have sold you something that's just like, all right, because gear score is just just a loose guideline as opposed to like what can be applied to the item.
I wanted maximum gather speed. I wanted maximum yield, maximum chance at rare materials.
Nice.
Just as a baseline, like those all have to be there.
Yeah.
So $5.99 with those 2 things, and then after that, I don't want durability. I don't care. I'm happy to repair my gear. I don't really care about the healing benefit, like the little like, oh, we're going to toss a hot on you. I don't care.
Okay.
And so after that, I want, either I wouldn't mind extra experience. It's not terrible. I wouldn't mind. There's a couple of things that I'm okay with.
Yeah.
And so at $5.99, you get 4 perks. And so it's about like, what are the best 2 other perks I can get?
I like the haste perk that basically makes you like,
it's nice,
legitimately like dead sprint to the next like node. And I don't know, it feels fun. Sometimes it's like, I know I'm going to get this massive haste boost. I'll just like gather that real quick and zip. So yeah, I think that's fun. Oh, so you're saying $5.99. So are you going for legendary tools?
The purple ones?
Oh, you're going for epic tools. Okay, so there's legendaries, I think.
Yeah, those are 20,000.
Yeah.
Starting, and they go up to 100,000.
Oh yeah, and you get those legendaries. Like
in which case, me saying all my star metal ores or ingots are worth 1,000 really means it's not worth anything.
Not really. Like it all adds up.
I did 2 laps of star metal ore farming, and like that would mean that I'd have to do that. I would have to do another 200 laps to pay off that tool.
Or you could buy list for star metal ore on the market if you've got if you usually get around 30 to 50K, you could just put buy orders up and you could let people farm for you, and then you can reap the profit.
That's a much more patient game.
I
need money today.
That's where the buy orders come in. Yeah. So boom, boom. What's going on, Gaming Badly? How are you doing tonight? Some people were hanging out yesterday while I was checking out Albion Online. I did a little bit of that last night on stream, which was pretty cool. It was so funny because I've had that game like installed and kept up to date, just like PSO2. all the time. It's always up to date. It is ready to be played. And it's like, all right, I hadn't touched it for like I hadn't touched Albion at all. I installed it and I was like, all right, I'll check back in. 9 months later, it's like, all right, I'll hit play. So it feels the same kind of with the Final Fantasy VII remake. I'm like, it's installed, it's ready to be played. Maybe I'll find some time to check that out.
Well, I'm really just trying to slam levels, and so that's why I'm not making any money. It's really hard to. It's really hard.
It's a balance, in that regards, because typically, like, I'll just like casually like gather things up, and obviously, like the economy has ebbs and flows. So just like with Final Fantasy 14, like before the patch, so it's like if you've got the materials, as soon as the patch is live, everybody comes back, and there's massive demand for various different materials and items. So it's like in the lull, that's a really great opportunity to stock up and have the items ready to go. And then when the hype hits, that's a really good opportunity to make money. New World's the same, the same kind of thing. It's like as people are excited and they want items. So it's like often, obviously it's a patience, man. I keep playing. So I'm like, yeah, it's like, okay, now it's I'm like, that's really cheap. I'm going to hold on to this for a little while because it's not going to go bad. And I have all this inventory storage. It makes it really easy to kind of get around. So I'm hoping to get, push into a lot of gold here in 2023. So far, I've been patiently buying my time and turning profits on lots of little things. So I always like to check in on that.
Well, it's hard to see how you actually end up making any serious money.
If you want serious money, you need to own the territory. Like if you want the money, like you want to be that Bezos, that next tier level gold farming generation. It's about territory ownership. And we don't have the numbers, I think, or the interest to be like, yep, let's push and own the territory. But I think that'd be fun at some point.
All right. Well, today we're talking about monetization.
We are. We're specifically talking about what went wrong with gaming. Josh Strife Hayes released a video recently. It's done really well. We're friends of Josh. He's a really good guy. But he released this video. We both watched it. We have not talked about it, but I do feel like I know, at least in terms of how my opinion goes about his video specifically on this topic, I'm probably not going to fall into the minority of the vocal majority on the internet when it comes to video game monetization. I have very, very strong opinions, and people like to tell me, about those strong opinions. But Chris, you recently watched it. Do you want to start this off before I?
Yeah. So he effectively decided that games are businesses and their goal is to make money.
Right.
But within that, they have to decide how to spend that money making a game in order to maximize their return. And that he believes that over the years, we have seen them increase the number of tools available to make money, and that those tools have garnered more and more of the development effort.
Mm-hmm.
So that means less effort percentage-wise is going into the things that make games good for the gamer. And those are all made up of something that he puts in a big box of these predatory techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of those techniques are, in the way he presents it, persuasive wise, are irredeemable. And there is no business. They are all parasitic in nature. And those techniques are only there to extract money from the gamer.
Yeah.
And they do not at all benefit the gamer. And that gaming would be better without them.
Right.
That's the premise of the video. It's a big, long video. A lot of people have watched it. I enjoyed it. I don't think that anything as complex as an industry with 30 years of development history that he covered is as simple as like this thing good, this thing bad. I think everything is a bunch of people in a room making a decision with the information that they have. And so I really struggle with that kind of absolute, like, this is what it is. It's bad. Because it kind of implies that at some point, some greedy goblin scurried into the boardroom and said, and then all of gaming was forced to honor that, and then it had no redeeming value, and that ever since we made a deal with the Goblin, we've all been screwed. And I don't feel that. The total pie of gaming has grown as the amount of money has gone in it. So even if a percentage of it has had to be about money making, that has allowed the total pie to be a great deal bigger, which means things like voice acting and storytelling and having real writers work on games now, real writers who would be perfectly talented in any other element of the writing industry. Like, the writing in these games and the voice acting in these games is incredible. And that comes from money. Like, that's what's allowed those to become careers where people can hone their craft to the level of skill we see today, as opposed to when I go back and play games from the 90s. I'm like, not like, what was the voice acting? I don't know. I got buddy Ted. Ted said he has a microphone. He said he'd get us some sound by Friday. Like, that's it. Are we paying Ted? I bought him a pizza. Like, that's like, it's gotten so much better. And that's a result of money. So, like, to just villainize that on its own, I disagreed with. Though, on the whole, yes, I agree that we have over monetized video games, and that sometimes some studios lose sight of the art because they're too busy paying attention to the business.
Yeah. The balance of art and business is always, throughout human history, even out beyond gaming, has always been that fluctuation, like what pays for the art and how does that go about it. I think obviously we've seen, like, I don't know, like, I would say if the whole industry is over monetized, but you can definitely see games that push that boundary and get pushed back. And that's where the strength in all of this is the strength of economics, because economics, the principles alone from supply and demand, teach that if you're sitting here and you do something and you make a monetization system and you make less money because of that's a bad system. And what ultimately kind of shakes out is that, I guess the question, especially his video raises about Diablo Immortal, is like, could they have designed it in a way that actually would have probably made them more money? And I would probably think yes. They really heavily like monetized that game in every conceivable fashion. And at the end of the day, gamers rejected it. They like, you move on. You do get that initial hit, and maybe that's all that was. It's like, we're just putting this out there. We have no plans on this. We know that there's going to be a damage to the brand, yada, yada, yada. Moving on. Diablo 4 will fix this in theory, in that regards. But my review of kind of his video, though, like when it breaks it down, because I think we're kind of in alignment here. His video felt like a massive circle jerk to internet echo chambers when it comes to monetization, without taking in the practical realities of the business side of things. Like, you brought it up, like, I feel like gaming has only gotten better. There are better games and more games, and there's also awful games and bad monetization strategies. But if I, as an educated consumer, have choice, I feel like I have way more choice now, almost to the point where there's too many entertainment choices. And we're seeing the consequences of that with subscription services and the like. But I feel like from a dollar per dollar, pound for pound, there's great games. There's great games to play. And it boggles my mind from how much some of these like games that I don't support profit from that. We haven't seen the entire industry say, screw it, we're only making this cannon fodder stuff because that's where the real money is. Like, I don't play Fortnite, but you have to look that Fortnite is just like World of Warcraft, setting a narrative of monetization that is already set within the culture. Anybody who's doesn't like cash shop and cosmetic items, well, welcome to the tar pits, because that's what the future is. They're already establishing that. In fact, when you go look at somebody who's being presented a subscription-based MMO, for example, they're like, why does this game have a subscription? Where's the cosmetic cash shop? Where's the battle pass? And that's to say that monetization in this case has also trained everybody into what's being expected. And I think it's only going to pick up steam, especially as more and more IPs kind of change. But yeah, I felt his video was kind of lackluster. It just felt like you're just preaching to a choir that's just gonna, go, yeah, I agree. Games are trying to ask me for too much money. when as a player, the answer is go put your money in the pile of the developer who's doing the thing that you like. Not every game is for everybody. It felt like a very bigger, like the problem with gaming, I don't view it as over monetization. I view it as the entitled gamer mentality that everything has to, appeal to you. If you're not on the hype train for whatever game, that you're entitled to be able to play it. We saw this happen last year with Elden Ring, a non over monetized game, but yet you saw all these people kicking back and frustrated at this game because it actually challenged you. And the question ends up being, are hard games allowed? And the answer should be yes. You as a player should have options of games. Not every game has to be for you. And that can be kind of hard because when you see all the socials, all the videos, all the trends, you kind of could feel left out nowadays where you're like, oh man, I would love to go play this aspect, but that's the breaks, kid. Them to breaks.
Yeah, I think that was where I really struggled, was that it was just so firm. And that microtransactions are something that are actually a really good solution to how do you take a variety of gamers that want to invest in a game at a variety of price points.
Yeah.
And one of the points where I really felt that he actually represented it quite well was when he said that these microtransactions, these skins, are about selling something that takes very little development effort for the maximum amount of money coming in. And in my mind, that is a benefit to the person who doesn't engage. If your goal is to get as much of the pie as possible without, because he shows it as a pie chart, if your goal is to consume as much of the pie as possible without consuming from the box, as he puts it, then that's good news. The fact that what is in the box is very little effort means you are getting the maximum amount of effort if you play a game and do not engage in microtransactions. If you don't buy skins, if you don't buy mounts, if you don't buy these things, you're actually coming out way ahead, which is like, I think, a counterpoint to his argument from inside of his video.
Yeah.
That I thought was really interesting. And so then the question becomes like, where is monetization? Where does it cross the line? Because we do agree it crosses the line. Like Diablo Immortal, for example, crosses the line.
Yeah.
But not because of any one of the techniques it has. It has battle passes. So let's just start there. Do you think battle passes are flawed?
I think the flaw is in their expiration. And I think that's actually a business flaw. Because if I was going to sit down and build something, I think the value is to be able to sell that thing in perpetuity, right? So the flaw is actually, in my mind as a player, I opt out of battle passes more often than not because I don't want that added pressure into trying to finish the grind off the schedule that they listed. So, for example, in Destiny 2, when it's 2 weeks before the new season and I'm excited to play the new season, it actually has me opt out because I know in 2 weeks, all that gets reset and nothing I'm doing really right now in terms of the season even matters. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to grind that up and complete that. I could if I wanted to. It's not a matter of, not having the ability or the capacity to do so. It's just the fact that in 2 weeks, it's a whole new grind anyway. Why pour that out? And so from a business perspective, I would say you've already made the season. You've already put the content in there. Why not give you the ability to sell that to somebody who's coming in year 3 or year 4, etc. In that regards, I think the flaw in the monetization system specifically is in how it is hidden and then exposed. I think if you sat down and told me, here's the monetization, the fact that you have content creators, especially with Diablo Immortal, having to dive in and discover all the new monetization ways the game unlocks over time, as opposed to being upfront about it and saying, hey, this is we monetize this game like insane levels. That's actually where I find more of a problem when it comes down to it. Like if it's going to be like you've given some examples of this in the nature. Like if you invite me over to your house for dinner and you feed me, and then at the end of the dinner, you're like, man, that wine was really expensive. It's like, okay, well, I would have happily brought the wine or chipped in. Like if you let me know beforehand, all of a sudden now it's kind of like, wait, what kind of relationship is this? You go to like one of those, you ever like been to those multi-level marketing things where like a friend's putting it on and it's like, oh, we're all having a good, oh, this is a marketing thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
going to get to the end and they're going to pass around a thing and they're going to say, oh, you liked that first wine, didn't you? Wouldn't you want to get some of that wine? I don't know if you've been to one of those where they're selling wine at the end. And so you get there and they're like, hey, we're going to have this whole dinner. And we're going to have like 6 different bottles of wine passed around. You're going to have a little sip from each bottle. And you're like, this is so nice. And you get to the end and they're trying to sell you 5 cases of wine.
Yeah.
You're like, what did I just agree to?
Right. Exactly. And so that's actually where I find their bigger flaw. Like if you want to sit here and say like, hey, we're going to have loot boxes. Cool. Make it so that before you ever download the game, like that is a known thing. So that when all of a sudden you have a loot box and it's going to reward you with random stuff, like that's not shocking. You're not like, oh man, you bamboozled me, you hoodwinked me and you brought me into this concept. And then all of a sudden the relationship changed because I think, and personally, I'm not a fan of kind of the RNG monetization. I'd rather just be more of a direct purchase. In fact, I would rather a purchase be tied into a grind so that the content isn't also instant gratification, because there is that aspect, right? We have this instant gratification. It feels good. There's nothing wrong. You go to work, I go to work, like you work these jobs, you put in these hours, you put in the time, and then, yeah, maybe you want to reward yourself with something like that. It's your money, like go nuts. And then the other aspect of it, like the other hat, is like as a parent, being very aware of how these games monetize and how essentially they try to disguise like their activities. For example, hey, make a small purchase so that later the device isn't going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to spend that big chunk of money? And I think that's essentially kind of how I go about it, because like, yeah, when my kids want something, like I want them to understand the value of that thing that they're asking. Hey, you could get that thing, maybe, same thing with the crane games, right? Maddie really is oddly good at them, but still it's like, there's no guarantee that you're going to win, kid. And so far she keeps winning. And so I'm just like, there's got to be a lesson here at some point where she doesn't win. And we're going to have to work through that emotion to like, yeah, this isn't a guarantee. This is, a gamble. Let's understand what this is. Gambling can be perfectly fine. Some people, they cannot handle it. We got to manage that interaction. And it goes by person to person, because I don't think everybody sits here and says, hey, this thing that I don't struggle with should be completely outlawed because somebody does struggle with it. We should just also, be honest with ourselves and say, yeah, I got a friend who's an alcoholic. And when I'm hanging out around them, I just don't drink, out of respect for the struggle that they have. But that doesn't mean that I'm not sitting here going like, all right, I lit all my alcohol on fire because I don't struggle with that as a personal, kind of thing. What do you think?
I think that we have started to equate gaming as doing something that like the rest of society isn't. Like it's this holier place that isn't doing all the same things. So with monetization, like I'm not saying that just because there's a flaw somewhere else in society, we need to be thrilled that it's in gaming, but we do need to be aware that it's just a natural tendency for if somebody learns that something works in one element of business, probably going to do that in other elements of business. And so if we're going to start being really mad at things like subscriptions or things like everything's a subscription now. You can subscribe to have food delivered. You can subscribe to have TV brought, whatever shows you want to watch on your television. You can subscribe to video games. You can subscribe to have your razors replaced. Anything you want. Somebody out there has made a subscription. They make subscription boxes that send toys to your kids to like discover new sciences or whatever. Like anything you want a subscription to, somebody has built it into a box that you can receive on a regular interval. When I was a kid, subscriptions were like, my parents had like a Harry and David one year where we got like fruit every month. And so like there were only a handful of those things, but now it feels like you could have $700 a month in subscriptions just coming into your house. There are car makers talking about having subscriptions determine whether or not your car can go as fast. I don't know if you've seen some of the luxury car makers. They'll give you a faster 0 to 60 time.
Yeah.
If you have a subscription, because basically they wanted to sell a faster car. It's cheaper to make all the cars the same and then have an optional premium price point for the people that would normally have bought the extra faster car. And then the people who weren't willing to pay for that technically get the same hardware. but they get the car at that price point. And like, that's the argument for it. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good that like I bought a car that's capable of going faster, and because I didn't pay you more, you won't
pay
give
you
it
more
to me
over time as well. Just like, yes, because chat's also bringing up the cars having heated seat subscriptions. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that ends up, there is a level of subscription fatigue. That's where, like, when we start to look at
good.
That's when we start to look at overall, like, as people kind of evaluate, especially as like when like you got a job and everything's going good, you can see how that like money can kind of just trickle itself out over time. It's very easy to do so. But then you start looking at like entertainment, Netflix, Disney, and all of a sudden, like if you are subscribed to everything, you start realizing like, oh man, I'm spending the same amount that I was spending like on this highfalutin, cable package, etc. So we always try to kind of rotate them in and out, in terms of like what we're watching, whatever quarter, etc. for whatever the subscription service that we're, like, which right now I think we have Disney, and we always have Prime, Amazon Prime, because we always have that free shipping anyway. So that's a one constant. And then essentially like it's like we're either on Disney or on Netflix. I haven't done Hulu in years, but and then it comes down to the MMOs, and that's where it's like when you start to look at something like Game Pass, where it's a subscription for all of these different things, it ends up being like, when you start to think about a subscription to a single game, it ends up becoming like a bigger competitor to that single game because it offers way more than that one single game could, usually around the same price point. And I do wonder if we'll start to see MMOs start to bundle themselves into that. That's one of the theories that I have about Amazon Prime Gaming right now and their continual investment to bring in more MMOs. We have 3 that they've announced. I believe that there's actually 2 or 3 more unannounced to the public right now, that essentially all of a sudden it's like, well, you get, with same thing with Sony. They're trying to build 10 games as a service games by 2025. That's 2 years away from now. On the backs of Destiny, etc., like to the point where like all of a sudden the Sony PlayStation Plus service adds even more value to this giant umbrella to try and keep people subscribed. So it doesn't matter if you're actively playing. We brought up Final Fantasy 14 and 11. Like having one subscription for that series of Square Enix would be great. Oh, take a break from 14 while you wait for 6.4. Oh, by the way, new update over here on Final Fantasy 11. It's like, maybe you've always wanted to experience it. Maybe you haven't, but it's still available to you. And then, but Sony's not Sony, Square Enix's CEO has expressed disinterest in a Square Enix subscription and a lot of interest in NFTs. And that in and of itself is a whole other bag of chips that you and I are both very, very concerned about.
Okay. So my counterpoint to the subscription thing is that not all subscriptions are bad. You name Final Fantasy 14.
No. Yeah, not all are bad.
I'm
just saying there's a fatigue.
That is if done well, there are subscriptions that bring value to your life, but every subscription needs to be aware that they are competing with everything else. In the very same sentence you said we have Amazon Prime, you looked at Final Fantasy 14, and those are people that may not feel like they're competing with each other, but they are. It's how many, like, I don't need to have a house payment worth of monthly payments. And so having my dog get a toy once a month is just not going to get priority over something, like an MMO that I play all the time. He doesn't need that.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of them. And, I wouldn't pay for heated seats in my car, especially living in Texas, over having a TV show that my wife and I could watch every night. And those feel like unrelated products, but because they've chosen to go with a subscription-based model, they're competing for the very same dollars.
Yeah.
So the next thing that comes to mind that he talks about is extending content. And so DLC, paid DLC. Are there times that DLC is, first of all, done poorly? Like, that's his argument, is that when we have to start paying for extra content, that means that they likely maybe even held content back to go put it in there.
See, that's the developer mind in me comes into play, because it is either yes or no. But the problem is that everybody assumes that it's yes. Like when it comes down to the development and how branches are run, and like, yes, we probably started working on this DLC and it happens to be the framework for it exists, but it's not completed content. And it might already be in the game. Data miners kind of expose that. And that's where you and I both agree, especially on the problematic data mining, setting bad expectations, is that that's already here. They're just charging me for what they've already sold me because the code is already on the disk. Does that happen? Yeah, I would venture to bet that has happened. And I would agree that is BS, right? Where you're like, hey, it's already here. Oh, we're going to charge you extra for it. Or it's, what they do is they just sell you the collector's edition, which, whatever.
Right.
But like where it's like actually already finished and we're personally choosing to hold it back, I think that's actually more rare than the norm. I think that's way more rare than the norm. The problem is data miners go and find that, and that essentially then causes that drama of like, the content's here, why can't I play it? Yeah, the framework is there. A lot of the assets are there because those were finished, but not everything gets finished at the exact same time. And it doesn't make sense for us to sit here and have solely different, build environments and how that all ultimately gets managed. So
if you know that you want to put horse racing in a game that you ride around on a horse, but like it's not something that really needs to be in the game, it would be best if you put a horse racing arena in there and you put the framework in there for people to have horse races, even if the horse races themselves aren't built, just because like otherwise you're not going to be able to add it later. So it makes sense to set that stuff aside. I think you get better DLC when it's planned for. But the question is then, did you take your eye off the ball and did you let the core team start to say, we'll just push that to DLC. We'll just push that to DLC.
The one counter, Final Fantasy 15. Exactly.
Final Fantasy 15 is not a complete game.
It's not.
The base game is not a complete game. And because they decided to put so much effort into all these post-based game systems that it wasn't ready on launch. Like there's all sorts of things. The digital world has allowed them to have the opportunity to ship games and fix mistakes. And that's awesome because back in the day, if they shipped a bugged disc, that's it. It's bugged forever and it's a ruined game forever. And it's awesome that they can fix those bugs because now you have players that are putting more hours in the first week that a game is released than any QA team ever could have. And they're going to come across weird stuff. And that's wonderful that they can fix that in post. However, that has also meant some studios feel like they're like, well, we'll just fix it in post. And so they ship a game that feels like there's obvious bugs, like you get to the very title screen and there's already one. And you're like, come on, there's no way nobody saw this. Not a single person tested this. And so that doesn't feel good. But the counterpoint to that is what you said, like setting aside that stuff in advance also means we get some really great DLCs. And so like, I like a lot of the like simulation games and the fact that I feel like I don't have to buy a new Sims game every year. I get to just keep bolting things on means that they get to continually do development. And it ends up being this kind of subscription type model, but they only get paid when they add content to my game, as opposed to Final Fantasy 14 and World of Warcraft, where I expect to get content on a regular interval because I'm paying you on a regular interval. That allows them, if they want to take 6 months off to build the next thing, go for it. I'm not paying you till it's done. And that individual DLC, I get to make an a la carte choice. I'm going to pass on this DLC, but I'll buy the next one. As opposed to in Final Fantasy 14, you don't get to just buy the odd numbered patches and the even numbered patches and have 365-day access. I only play the odd numbered content, but I want to play it 12 months a year. That's not one of the choices. Like you are either buying all the patches that come to the game or you don't have access to the game.
And there's like the subscription model itself like isn't bad. I think it's either implemented well or it's implemented flawed. One of the things that we'd like, just to bring it up personally from a software engineering perspective, like you could either spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on Visual Studio or, and that's the version. So like, let's say I bought, which I did like 2013. I think at that time I ended up paying like, I think $900 for it. Maybe I'm misremembering the price point, but it was a hefty chunk of money. And then if I wanted the MSDN license, which gives you all the service packs and more, like that's even more. But they ultimately made it like your initial purchase was much bigger. And then after that, so on and so forth. Now, I believe I pay like $30 a month for Visual Studio. And that means whenever they come out with a new version, I have that version. I have all the stuff that I need and or possibly want. And that kind of repeats and rinses. So it gives me the opportunity at a lower price point to be able to step into the tools, make sure I'm learning the tools, understanding them, and maybe even be able to build things that could drive value. And same kind of concept with like Adobe and more. There is going to be a market for everybody. Somebody's going to be like, I just really just want to purchase this and I don't want to have any reoccurring costs, versus I want to be able to just say, hey, I want to be able to get in and scale without having to have a lot of these things. And gaming is the same kind of way. We've seen them try to reduce the overall barriers for entry, because I think gamers are habit forming. Like when we look at one of the problems that's brewing in gaming right now, isn't monetization. It's that you have these massive franchises that is where the money is. That is where the safe bet is. And you don't see so much outside the indie scene in these other areas, right? So you actually are creating like a big gap. The games have to get bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where they're really struggling. The company's really struggling to release a like fully featured complete game. And then the indie scene. And then what we're missing is kind of this mid-tier, like, almost kind of a reflection on life. Like the middle class terms of these games aren't really being released. Same concept with movies, is that these two extremes are kind of becoming further and further apart. And subscriptions can help out with that. Game Pass, actually, from a value-driven perspective, can help out with that. You have less risk and more exposure, where you have to spend ungodly amounts of marketing money or hire a streamer that's really popular to really try to get your name out there in the current gaming market. And so you start, and there's going to be a cost and effect to that, to where it becomes even more of a risk to try and make that big budget AAA MMO. And so gamers will end up paying more of a cost, because there'll be less iteration, because it just becomes such a big risk, and no one wants to start to spend, $500 million, to release their game and have it not do well. That's bad business. That's a quick and easy way to be saying like, well, I guess it's time to go home.
Right. Yeah. So to move on to another one, he talked about premium currencies. So this is gems, keys, whatever they want to call it. Sometimes there are ways to acquire it in game. Sometimes there are not. Sometimes it's sold in big, even increments. Sometimes it's not. His bigger gripe was when they sell you 99 of it and you need 100 for the item, or they sell you 105 of it, and so then you have 5 left over, and you're like, well, I might as well just purchase to the next tier. How do you feel about kind of premium currencies before I get into my thoughts on it?
That's the psychological thing. Like the fact is that it gets converted. The more times you convert a currency, the less connection you actually have with it. Same thing with credit cards in that regards. Like studies have shown that you spend more on a credit card than if you actually had cash in hand, just because of the pain of letting go of that physical cash, as opposed to the credit card tends to say like, hey, customers spend more. Same concept, right? Like if you have to convert your money into a currency, like you're going to every step that you have to add of math just makes it easier for players to do that. But that's why they do it. And the fact that you can't then convert that currency back into like real money, like that ends up making it, that ever so challenging. So once they have that money, it's kind of like, I've always kind of thought of it about that first drop off window at the fast food place. Like you hand them your money and then your food's going to be down the line. You're already kind of pot committed, right? You're like, well, I've already paid them. I might as well go ahead and get this or get that, and drive off. And I think that's the same concept. Now, is it nefarious? I think if you go beyond one step, that's where it gets kind of tricky. Like I convert this into this and I do this. That's where it's like, okay, we're playing a game here. We're trying to make it so I don't know what's happening. Kind of like the cups scenario. It's like, hey, okay, what's going on? But I think there's got to be some kind of tax ramification. I think there's got to be, like, outside the psychological thing, I think there's got to be a reason of like, okay, you bought this virtual thing and then you can use that virtual thing for an number of things.
That's really where, like, I think they come out ahead. I think premium currencies are a real advantage in that you can now distribute them back to players and you don't have to worry about taxes and all of that. And so if you want to be able to give those back to players, I think there's a real value in having a premium currency. Guild Wars gives away gems for hitting various achievement milestones and things like that. And so if you want to do that, then having a premium currency that people buy into, that makes that lateral. You're going to get this much across this much playtime. or you can augment that rate. And this currency is only used for things of the following definition. And the question becomes, what's that definition, right? Is that something that buys power? If it buys power, does it buy the best power, or does it just buy catch-up power? And so if somebody can get up to item level 1000 and they can buy up to 900, which is relatively easily attainable, and it just shortens that grind for them, then it's a boost, right? That's all it effectively is. It's a gear boost. But if the best gear in the game is item level 1000 and they can buy 1050, or they can buy 1000, and 1000 is normally a 10 billion hour grind, then that starts to be where that premium currency starts to really struggle. As opposed to, like, I don't really care if somebody, like right now in World of Warcraft, we're buying item level 424s. If somebody wants to pay for a collector's edition boost of some kind and it wants to put them in 340, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me. I liked the act of getting to 340. I enjoyed that grind. And so in my mind, they paid extra money to take away something I did enjoy. So it's like, how could you, they could be like paying somebody twice as much at a restaurant to eat half your meal for you. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But if somebody's like, I like the feeling of an empty plate and I'm not that hungry and I'm willing to pay twice as much to have somebody eat half my meal for me, then knock yourself out. Like, that's totally your call. As long as that person's not now getting an experience I don't get. So if they're buying item level 1000 and I can only get to item level 900, that doesn't feel good at all. Oh, they're powerful because they swipe their credit card. Like, that just very clearly makes a class of players and says, I'm not really welcome here. I'm tolerated here. I'm not really welcome here. Yeah. And that makes me want to play something else. So I think that's kind of the big ones that stuck in my mind that he tackled as far as monetization. I think you and I are both very
well. There's another one, that we didn't talk about that I'd like to get your opinion on.
Okay.
Before we do that, though, Veritas is saying that premium currency also makes it so you have a kind of a universal storefront, and then the currency conversion by region actually makes it a much easier transaction in the game, as opposed to saying like, oh, this costs this in America and this in UK and this in Japan.
It does,
which is a really good point, and I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It separates them from the complexity of real world currencies.
Now, the thing that I'd like to get your thoughts on, because this is something that just boils my blood. This is the one thing that really irritates me. Console or system exclusive content. The game exists across everything, but if you want the full experience, you either have to experience that full experience on a particular system or across multiple systems where you have console exclusivity to content. Call of Duty, and like the reality is that as much as like people are hitting on Microsoft right now for trying to acquire Microsoft Blizzard, like they're literally just buying a company where Sony will actively spend money to keep things off of the Xbox ecosystem, like Hogwarts Legacy. There's exclusive PS5 content for that game. Call of Duty, like almost every year, it's like they have an exclusive mode, not even like here's the skin. And so they've done it with Destiny in the past. Like, that's the one thing that it's like,
yeah. No, they're doing. No, when the judge at that court hearing asks Sony, hey, do you have any evidence of what this would look like? We do.
Yeah.
Be sure you cross your name off at the top, Sony, because you're going to be showing them your contracts. Like, they're the ones who have been doing this by and large, in my experience. So for them to accuse Xbox of doing it feels really weird. Like, are there problems if Xbox becomes a little bit bigger? Maybe. Yeah. I don't know that Sony, who is bigger than them and is more abusive of this system, should be the one to call them out. If it was instead a couple of indie devs on Steam getting together and saying, hey, we really don't like this. All right, let's hear them out. This might negatively impact them. I don't see how this hurts Sony. And I don't see how it hurts the player, because worst case, you're like, but I bought a PlayStation because they were PlayStation exclusive and now they're Xbox exclusives. I don't know what to tell you. There should have been none in the first place.
There should have been none
in the first place. Arguing that it was okay when it was bad, but it was bad in your favor is not a good option. Exclusives. I don't think anything's black and white in this entire conversation.
Right.
There are times that a first-party exclusive makes 100% sense. The Wii, bringing Wii Sports out, Doesn't matter if they sold that game at a loss because they distributed so many copies of the console with it. What that did was it was a developer showcase of what the Wii could do. The Wii was a unique piece of hardware with unique properties and was going to affect what could be developed on there. So showing developers, here's what it is, showing players, here's what you should be looking for, building hype around it. It did that. It guarantees them, in theory, first parties also guarantee them an on-time launch. In theory. And so now you have somebody who can pair, hey, we want this game to come out with this big hardware push. We want this game to come out when the console goes on sale. We want to have these bundles, things like this. It does all sorts of things that helps you highlight the hardware. And so if you want first parties to be exclusive because they are going to be something that helps highlight your hardware, that does not bother me. If the PS6 releases with some quantum graphics card that has never existed in the entire world, and they want to have a first party studio design the very first ever quantum graphic card game, go nuts. That makes 100% sense to me. On the other end, third party exclusives. If there are third party companies out there that listen, we're a tiny little indie dev, we were trying to throw up a Kickstarter, the Kickstarter failed, we don't know what we're going to do, we want to make a game, and Sony calls us up and says, we don't want to own you, but we do want to own rights to your game for the first year because we think it's really awesome. Your Kickstarter was for $100,000. We're going to give you a cool mill. Don't even worry about it. If it is bringing things to the player that would not have existed otherwise, they would have never existed, then by all means, you can have exclusive rights, especially for timed exclusives. There is an in-between.
Yeah. I'm with
Final
you.
Fantasy 16.
Right.
Why the hell is that not everywhere on day one?
The only thing I could see, like, and again, if 16 does come to PC, if it does come to Xbox, like that is in and of itself the ultimate BS move from Sony, and you know, like, and I can get timed, right? Like I can get timed. I can say like, you know what, that's business, and I can get that something that can only be run on hardware, right? Like if you believe that this game, so there's no reason, and if they bring 16 to the PS4, that would be absurd, right? Like that would be like, what the hell? Like you said that this is the target hardware for the target experience, and then you're degrading that experience for sales, and then you're doing that on some kind of timing structure. But like from a hardware perspective, if something cannot run
with Freet on the Xbox,
oh dude, that'd be awful. That would just be such a BS. That's bad for the gamers. It's bad for the gamers. The same thing with they did with Marvel. And the thing is, it's like the thing that I like argued is like if Marvel's Avengers was a better game, like if it was better received, like I think a lot of people would start to relate more to what I'm about to say. But people will hear about what I'm going to say and they'll say, "Well, Avengers was a bad game." Like I get that. But the fact they had Spider-Man as an exclusive character within this game that's a multiplayer game hurt Marvel's Avengers. It hurt it because also Marvel's Avengers was not cross-play, cross-save. That feature, cross-play, cross-save, especially in a multiplayer game, is far more important to the health of any live service game than some kind of exclusive character. So assuming, like, if you could go back and say, like, if Marvel's Avengers was a good game, like it would still have struggled because Sony made this deal, because that then also limits the crossplay, cross save, because it does restrict that character, and it reduced Spider-Man to just some kind of carbon copy, like basic thing. And that's where it's like, this isn't good. If you think of gamers first as the mindset, and then how you build strong gaming communities around these games, like putting up these artificial walls just and having people defend those artificial walls with their like all their energy, like it boggles my mind, because those companies don't care about you. Like I'm perfectly fine if your team PlayStation, does not bother me. I'm looking for a PS5 because I want to play 16. It sucks that I have to go find a PS5 to play 16. And this deal for 16 had better be like absurd. Like that check should have so many zeros, right? So many zeros behind it. Because at the end of the day, they're also saying we're getting our ass kicked on a global scale. We need to sell more games. Why are you then like locking these exclusivities? Like what the CEO is saying and then what they're doing sound like two contradictory and very different aspects, to the point where Sony just propose, like, if you're going to make them a first party studio, like just get down on the knee, give them the ring, lock it down, and I'll still be a little bit frustrated, but at least it's going to feel a little bit better as opposed to you going in and saying like, oh, we're going to spend money so that the game sells less. And people then will counter like, oh, these games don't really sell on Xbox. Do you wonder why? You like the answer is because they're keeping them off the platform. And so ultimately you've trained people to say like, especially for PC players, like at the end of the day, like the fact that it's not going to run on GeForce Now, the fact that it's not going to run in these other environments, like you are effectively limiting and saying you got to be locked here to this experience. 2001's calling again and says, hey, you got to get on this PlayStation to play this one game. The industry's moved on. I think gamers have moved on, and ultimately this is just going to continue to build up more and more frustration. And I think it costs Sony more goodwill than anything else.
I mean, eventually, maybe. I just like that's where my line is.
Gamers are weird because
when it takes content that needed to be in game, that could afford to be in game, and it locks it away just for the sake of it. That's where I really struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And timed exclusives being either just forever exclusives or timed exclusives in markets where it's effectively the same thing. If you lock Call of Duty down for a year, they're like, it's only for a year. It's an annualized franchise. Yeah. That's the life cycle. If you lock FIFA down for a year, that would be the same thing. It's an annualized franchise. Saying, well, you can buy FIFA 22 in March of 23 is stupid. Mm-hmm. So that's where I do really, really struggle. So like, I think Josh did a really good job of communicating the downsides of a lot of these systems and the timeline in which those things kind of came to be, and how they made a lot of sense as the next way to extract money from gamers and why gamers suffered. But what he did not do in that video, and maybe that video isn't long enough to tackle the other side of it, but what he did not do is talk about how along the way, the amount of money in the gaming has allowed publishers to take huge risks. And we have had ridiculous advances in servers and in publish dates and in conventions and all these things as a result of the amount of money. The fact that we are starting to, as an industry, see an amount of money go into gaming that is calculated in billions, as opposed to when his timeline started in the 80s, it wasn't, has allowed there to be way more games than ever before, of a much higher caliber than ever before. And a lot of these systems have allowed developers to make full-time livings, content creators to make full-time livings, journalists that want to focus only on gaming to make full-time livings, game stores like GameStop to make a full business out of supporting and caring for gamers. And so like, that's a good thing. There's an entire industry to support this hobby now, as opposed to keeping it a passion project out of somebody's garage. Like it's way better in all of those ways. And so like, are there downsides? Absolutely. And he did a great job hammering all of those. But where I really struggled was that the box seemed like a place that was just dark and dank and gross. And anything that's in the box is all bad. And the box just smells of vomit, and we should leave it sealed forever. And anything that comes out of it is toxic waste. And that's just not true. Each of the systems he put in the box has been used to advance a studio, to advance a concept at some point, in a way that there have been gamers who felt that they got a fair amount of entertainment for a fair amount of either their time or their dollars or both.
Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, a lot of this, the frustration I see boil up when I kind of just talk to a lot of gamers and get a lot of feedback, and kind of compile all that. It seems that it's the belief that, money and having a lot of it is going, that villainous mindset, that evil mindset, that the indie, the struggling, like that's the true art versus something that's bigger. And the fact is the bigger companies do things that, just can't happen on their own. Like they can create an experience in a world like an MMORPG that just does not happen, on its own naturally from, kind of an indie studio. And so I've always kind of said like money doesn't make you good or bad. It just makes you more of who you are. And when it comes down to it, it's like, yeah, people can do bad things for money or good things with money. And it's really going to be about that perspective, just like within a game, like a monetization system that is clear and direct and tells you what it is. And then you as a player choose to opt into that. And whether you like to enjoy the game from that perspective, great. Like the relationship's understood. You knew what you were getting into. You know, like, oh great, like this game has a sub. Cool. I'm behind that. Or, oh, this game has cash shop items. Great. I understand it. I understand the relationship. I can choose to spend my time and money there. I think that's fine. I think that's a fair approach. Whenever they hide it behind these walls of secrecy so that you have to unlock and get further in and further in, that seems almost like a cult. Like that almost seems where it's like to really get to the good stuff. Like, okay, you've already, and then eventually you've got to this point of like, well, I've already spent a little bit of money. What's the harm of spending a little bit more just to get to the next level and to the next level? And then eventually you're like, wait a minute, like I'm not having fun anymore. And the game just constantly keeps saying, hey, where's the money? And then you're like, oh, you're farming me. You're not giving me the value for the dollar. And that's where you kind of see those things. And so I always kind of say, just be responsible with your money. Like don't sit here and think that a game is like a girlfriend. There's a business aspect, and there's nothing wrong with that game making money, because that means that more people will want to make either more games or make that game even better. Like money is that solution, and it doesn't mean that the company is wrong for asking you for it. Just understand the relationship that you're getting into, so that way you're not sitting here at the end of the dinner being asked to buy a box of wine.
That's it. I'd say chapter that thing out and put the chapters in there and send it.
We did it, guys.
We did it.
We did it. All right. I think that's a good thing to end on. Thanks guys in chat for being in here. Skakrat says, don't forget to like and smash that button, support the videos. So that's great. Let's see how many likes. I haven't actually, I never really looked. 11 likes on the YouTube side of things. So that's great. In the pinned comment, you can go hang out with Chris. You can talk about more of this. We didn't really get into Nintendo. I saw a couple people bring up on the Nintendo when exit. Like Nintendo's doing just fine. Like out of everybody in any game in industry, like they print money. They make money off the sales of the system. They make money off the sales of the game. But I don't think Nintendo's the be all end all when it comes down to it. Like
they also don't have to follow any of the same rules. They could put out a press release that if you want your kid to get Pokemon and you line up in front of Nintendo headquarters, we can promise that child will not receive Pokemon and will be punched in the face, and people would line up. Like it doesn't make any sense. They do whatever they want and they print money. They own some of the most like influential IP ever made in gaming.
Yeah.
And their business decisions just don't have to line up. And so like them as an example is just like, it just isn't representative of what a typical even gaming publisher experiences.
Yeah. And Nintendo went and actually started publishing like across the board, even on a time thing, right? Like you're like, hey, if Mario comes out, and then 10 years later, we're going to release it on PC or something like that. Like, I don't know what that would look like if financially, like they'd make insane amounts of money on top of the insane amounts of money that they're already doing. One thing that they do, that the reason why they don't do that is it preserves the mystique. It's like the Disney Vault, right? Like you can only get this here, that drives the value of the system. And in a way, Nintendo is actually more of a hardware company than they are a software company, where, like Microsoft is, more a software company than they are a hardware company. But I would like to be able to play Nintendo games in more places. And honestly, I would like to see them step more into cloud gaming as an option with whatever Switch 2 ends up being. But we'll have to see, because they're in no hurry to sell out. I think, honestly, they're really trying to push the Switch to break, go past the DS, because Switch just passed the PS4. It's on its way to 120 million units if it hasn't already crossed that. And I don't know if it'll hit PS2 level, but I think essentially it does have a striking distance that they keep it up and running to actually overtake the Nintendo DS. So it's gonna be wild. All right,
cool.
Mini Nintendo podcast right there, guys. All right, I'm gonna hit end broadcast and we're gonna wave it out. Thanks for joining us on Friday. We'll be back on, I think, Monday. We don't have anything scheduled, but there's a topic that we were talking about.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Final Fantasy quiz.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that Chris made for us. So I'm excited for that as well. So all right, ending broadcast, guys. We will see you in the next one. And I'm just gonna wait.